Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Master Series. Today is the 1st of November, 2022, and I am the real Jason Duncan, coming to you from the wonderful city of Pigeon Forge, Tennessee Public Library. They are allowing me to use this space because I'm staying at my cabin in the mountains this week, and have no internet on top of the mountain. So when I have to do coaching sessions or have to do webinars like this, I come down to the beautiful Pigeon Forge Library, and they let me use it. I'm a card-carrying member of the library now, so I'm happy to have this opportunity to meet with you here live on this webinar. Now, some of you are probably listening to this after the recording. You're listening either on the replay because you got it in an email, or you're watching it on YouTube, or you're listening to it on The Root of All Success, which is my podcast where I talk with entrepreneurs about their stories of success. But no matter where you're listening to this, whether it's live or whether you're, watching this here right now live or where you're listening to it later, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining in. Looks like we got a really good group of people here live today. So when we get into this, which I'll do some introductions here in just a second, but when we get into this, there's a Q&A bubble at the bottom of your Zoom screen that we're going to take live questions throughout the webinar. My guest Eric and I will be happy to answer those as we go live through today's topic. But before we get into the topic, before I officially introduce today's guests, I want to talk a little bit about what the Entrepreneur Master Series actually is. And the Entrepreneur Master Series is designed as a live webinar series that I do every couple of weeks as a 90-minute live webinar to bring you high-value content for entrepreneurs. It's designed to be practical. It's supposed to be tactical. It's not as much about stories like a traditional podcast would be. This is really diving into the weeds on some super important topic to you as an entrepreneur and how you can be better as an entrepreneur. And so, like I said, I bring a top expert in twice a month to go through his or her area of expertise. I'm designing this and curating this to be a masterclass on these topics related to growing and scaling and building entrepreneurial companies. Each episode is conducted by Zoom. And as I said, it's also released as a special episode on The Root of All Success. So if you haven't subscribed to The Root of All Success, you can do that at therootofallsuccess.com. So now let me tell you a little bit about the topic for today's episode. The topic is never do these three things in a sales negotiation. Now, we all know that sales negotiation between buyers and sellers ideally lead to a deal being closed that in a way that both parties can appreciate. However, there are certain do's and don'ts of these types of negotiations. And how do we get the most out of each one of these conversations? My guest expert today is Erich Rifenburgh, and he has extensive training and practical negotiation experience that he is ready to share with you today live here on EMS, the Entrepreneur Master Series. Let me tell you a little bit about Erich, and then I'll have him in just a moment. I'll do a formal introduction. He'll be able to turn his camera on. But Erich Rifenburgh holds 2 MBAs in international business, both from the University of South Carolina and the Vienna University of Economics and Business. After graduate school, he spent several years living and working in Europe for Emerson Network Power. And Emerson sent him to an executive program in international management hosted by Stanford University and the National University of Singapore. The knowledge that he gained throughout this experience was put to work over 8 years working in Malaysia, in China, and in Singapore. And he has gained valuable insights on how to create value, to regain and maintain the upper hand in a negotiation, and to do that while fostering collaborative relationships. He doesn't just rely on theoretical approaches to his clients' challenges. Instead, he uses his real-world experience and the associated lessons to help his clients maximize their outcome. And after years of traveling the globe and working for others, Erich now works directly with select clients who want access to his practical negotiation experience. And what's interesting about Erich is that he and I can't actually remember how we met, but when we did get introduced and I said, hey, I do this webinar, I wanted to get him in because I wanted people like you, the audience, to hear how to negotiate for someone who's done it at high levels. Sure, I've sold a lot of stuff. I'm sure you've sold a lot of stuff, but this guy has negotiated at high levels in business. So help me welcome Erich Rifenburgh to EMS. Erich, go ahead and turn your camera and your audio on and join the show.
All right. Thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it. I think the real takeaway and the thing I want to share with everybody is I kind of got my butt kicked by a lot of big companies. And that's what really was the learning that helped me become a better negotiator. I made a lot of classic mistakes. And that's what we're going to talk about today is, how do you avoid some of those common negotiation challenges? We don't have enough time to go through a lot of material, but I just wanted to pick out 3 things that I see over and over. And I think helping you with that is really going to light a fire with you, get you more interested in this idea of how you're negotiating. And, like Jason said, we want you to walk away with something practical. So I want you to try this out in the wild when you leave. And I'd love to hear any feedback or send Jason feedback and if it's working, because that's all that matters, right? Is that it works.
That's right. And I always tell my clients, the magic is in the action. You could sit and listen to this crap all you want and you could think it's amazing, but until you go put something into practice, you actually do it, there's not going to be any change in your life. It's got to be done. You've got to actually do it. I'm going to pop into the chat room right now, and I'm going to put some information here. Let me say this to everyone. It says, feel free to ask any questions by using the Zoom Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. So as we go throughout the show today, if you've got a question, you're here live, you want to ask, just pop it in, not in the chat, because I know we're not used to using the chat, but go to the Q&A bubble and do that. In the chat window, what you're going to see is I'll be sharing links to separate different things as we go throughout. Information about Erich, I'm going to drop his bio in there. So anything you need on just information I'm sharing with you will be in the chat. If you got a question, use the Q&A bubble. So Erich, how did we, do you remember how we originally got introduced? Who introduced us?
I don't remember. I'm ashamed. But we met a long time ago. And a lot of things have happened in life since then. But I've been a loyal follower.
Well, thank you. And what I do remember about you is that you're a motorcycle guy too. At least you were in the past. You rode BMW GSs, right. And you live in Colorado, and so we've got that that in common in motorcycles. But I don't know how we met, but I'm very I just remembered my good friend Justin Denherger, one of my best friends in the world. He was at a conference with what is it, Kings?
Rise Up Kings?
Something. Rise Up Kings. Yes, he was part of Rise Up Kings, and you spoke at one of their events, and he was really impressed with you, and that's how we got introduced. So now I remember.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout out to Justin if he's listening. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Well, so let's do this. I have a question as we get started, Erich, to get things rocking and rolling. Okay. What is negotiation? Like at the base, base definition. What is it, and why should we be interested in it at all?
Yeah, you hit me with a hard one because it's kind of, negotiations as I see it, I'm always looking at it through the lens of B2B engagement. So transactions, sales and procurement transactions and B2B situations. And that's how I think about, resolving issues, uncovering what's important to each party, the ability to accelerate and grow value in a deal is how I see negotiations. It isn't, let me see how much value I can take away from this person in order to enrich myself or to get a lopsided agreement. That may work in your personal life. It never works in business, right? Because we want to do business generally long-term, especially in any B2B transaction. You want repeat business because customer acquisition costs are so high. So it's really about how do you find that agreement where both parties take value away and want to continue to do business. And that, so I don't know, that's not the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but that's how I think about it. And that's one thing I want you all to take away from my discussion is, I'm not here to talk about theory. I know we talked about a lot of my academic achievements early in my career, but that was, as I've gotten older, that doesn't really mean anything. It's about what happens in the real world. And that's where I want to stay focused. So that's how I think about it. And we're going to talk about how I think about negotiations in a B2B setting. And that's where we're going to stay focused rather than an academic sense.
Well, and I think I appreciate that, and I know that everybody listening will appreciate that as well. One of the things that I would say, my answer to my own question, I didn't really think about that ahead of time, but when I talk about sales, and I do a lot of sales training, although I'm not really a sales trainer. I do a lot of sales training for my clients. Yeah. But one of the things that somebody taught me a long time ago is that a sale happens when both parties agree on the truth of what's being presented. And I really liked that definition because sales, generally speaking, isn't just, hey, I present something to you and you immediately say, okay, and buy it and walk away. That technically, I guess, by dictionary definition is a sale. But most of us, when we're dealing with high level, long-term sales processes in a business to business situation, there's a lot of negotiation back and forth. And I think still that definition stands that in order to get through that negotiation successfully, we have to agree on the truth of the matter. Like, I believe X, and if you believe Y, we're not going to do a deal here. So you say there's 3 things you should never do in a sale. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you take it. I know you have some slides you want to share, go through some stuff. So I'll be the inquisitive host,
just to keep
I'll let you take
myself, organized on my thoughts. But before we start, one thing I want to say is that whole idea of negotiation, it starts at the first interaction. It doesn't happen after you've gotten a certain path down in the sale. It starts at your first interaction. You're constantly gathering, collecting information, listening, and understanding what your other party wants. So let's just leave that as a backdrop. I'm going to pull up a slide. So what we're going to talk about today is 3 common challenges. Can you see my screen?
I see it. And I know those that are live can also see it. If you're listening on the webinar or a podcast later, you can't. So you got to go back to YouTube and take a look at this.
All right. So missing out on high value trades. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute. Not maximizing deals from the start. So really not starting with the right initial offer, not being ambitious enough. So we're going to talk about that. And then understanding what is your true source of negotiating power. Where do you and your counterparty derive your negotiating power? And a lot of that has to do with your alternatives. So we're going to talk about that one too, and try to do so very practically. So what I'd like to do, and do we have any interaction with the audience in terms of asking more, so maybe some more specific questions? What I'd like to do is, can we do a raise hands or do a yes and no? Here's the backdrop.
We can do that.
You're up against a difficult, competitive negotiator. Any of you in business know exactly how that feels. Would you be willing to give away something that doesn't really mean anything to you early in the negotiation to gain goodwill, to get the negotiation going, to get some traction, to break things loose? How many say yes? And we've got 8 people, so you'd be willing to give something away you don't care about at all, to get things moving, to get some momentum going. What do we got?
Got some that are saying in the Q&A. So if he'll ask a question for live, go to your raise hand. There's a little raise hand button down at the bottom. You can do raise and lower your hand. So if you raise your hand, we'll assume that's a yes.
So we got a couple of yeses. That's okay, great. So we've got, I saw 2 yeses. And then Jason, we're going to pick on you because we can interact, right? So what do you think?
That's right. So yeah, I answered yes, just immediately. Do you consider it a better to give something of little value earlier in negotiation to gain goodwill? I think yes, but with the caveat, only if necessary.
Okay. Well, what do you mean only if necessary?
If we're early on and they're going, I'm not going to do this unless, and then whatever their unless is something I don't technically care about, I would be willing to give that away. Okay.
All right. Good. So so someone who, I know we can't hear the other people, but like some people would say no because they're like, hey, if I give something away early in the negotiation and I'm dealing with someone who's really competitive, they could be a bully, right? And it's usually bad to set a precedent starting to give things away to someone, because are they going to want more or are they going to want less? They're always going to want more, right? Hey, thanks for your lunch money. I appreciate it. I won't ask you tomorrow, right? That's not going to happen. So that's one reason some people who've answered this question have said no. And other people say, I would just never, the way I negotiate, I would never give anything away up front. That's just not who I am. And that could be because you're very competitive as well. So the way I want you to think about this, so you said yes. The first thing we need to understand is what does what you're giving away mean to the other party? Too often we're stuck in our own head and we start analyzing the situation based on how we feel about this negotiable. Because remember, I positioned it, would you be willing to give away something you don't care about? And I know at least 3 of you said yes. And that's because you're not thinking about what it means to your counterparty, stepping in their shoes. And the danger could be, if you're giving away the most important negotiable for them, even though it doesn't mean anything to you, you have no leverage later in the negotiation. You have no way to trade. So you have no way to maximize that deal. Make sense?
Following.
Yeah. So we want to make sure that if you are going to give something away, you first spend time doing some discovery, which is a key sales skill, and understanding what's important to your counterparty first and why it's important to them. Like, what is their underlying motivation? And I mean going multiple levels deep. Once you understand that, now you can begin to decide how you're going to trade that. And if you can trade it for something you don't care about, that's fantastic. Hopefully you can get something in return, right? I'll give you your most important negotiable, and I'm willing to give you whatever it is I don't care about. But in return, I would like you to give me something that I care about, maybe you don't. And that's the game. And that's how we're adding value to our negotiations, by understanding the relative importance of each negotiable to both sides, so that we can make equitable or value-added trades. And any of you out there who've got a sales organization, or maybe a couple of salespeople, especially when they're young, you'll notice that they tend to give things away because they want to be liked. They want to give a discount. They want to give better terms. They want to give some bells and whistles away up front, not recognizing what they're giving away could be extremely high value to their counterparty, and they could have traded for it. Price, terms, delivery, something else, whatever it is that you promise. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I find, what I find, Eric, is that when I'm training salespeople, and I used to do this too as a newbie, is that a lot of times, if somebody asks for something, whether it's a discount or something additional, they immediately go, if they have the ability to do so, they'll immediately say yes, without first analyzing, well, why are they asking? Is there a reason behind it? I mean, is there something I can trade for this? So I think this is a great point.
yeah, that's exactly right. Like, why do you want it? I mean, years ago, I was selling to a company called Nortel Networks. They were the largest telecom company in the world. We were doing initially $200 million in business with them. Over time, it went down to $50 million. Before we started our negotiation, they threw a precondition at us. Before we negotiate, you have to agree up front to give us 10% cost reduction across the board. Now, we were selling power supplies into telecommunication equipment, and we weren't necessarily sole source. So they had an option on a lot of the parts we sold to them. But they threw a precondition out of, you need to have better pricing. Of course, they asked for longer terms. They asked for a few other things like open book pricing. And, being a young salesperson, I didn't think about why. I just thought, God, do I need to do that? Does this make sense? But of course, we learned later the reason why they were pushing so hard on terms and payment terms and price was they were going out of business. And they ultimately filed for Chapter 7, which means they liquidated. They didn't, go for bankruptcy protection. They liquidated their assets, went out of business. So why is someone asking you for something? What's driving it? And I have several clients that are small businesses, maybe, $5, $10 million businesses, where maybe they're negotiating a lease, or they're negotiating a purchase of a new site where they're going to build a new building, and they're not getting into the head of the seller of why do they want to sell? Why are they looking for what they're asking for? And how do I trade versus that? So it's too bad we didn't have more people that could interact on this one. This is always a great one to interact on because everybody has an opinion up front on it. But
yeah, well, it sounds so. Eric, what I hear you saying in this is that first thing that you shouldn't do is missing out on high value trades. And by the way, for everybody that's here live, I dropped those 3 bullet points into the chat. So if you want to see what those 3 bullet points are in one spot, they're all right there. But what you're saying here, what I'm hearing you say, and I want to make sure I'm hearing it right because I want to make sure the audience hears it right. Missing out on high value trades is something people shouldn't do in a sales negotiation. In other words, you should be asking why when they're asking for something. If they want something, a discount, extra something, you got to ask why, because you could be missing out on a high value trade.
Yeah, and I think another important point is you may be giving, just because you don't value something doesn't mean it's not important to your counterparty. And it doesn't mean they wouldn't be willing to give you something that you value highly in return for getting it. And I'll give you all another example, because examples of what it's all about. I have a client that's in the transportation business, and they have a program that they often give away to their clients. And this program allows you to track your shipments. It allows you to overlay all of your freight on top of like geopolitical issues, port closures, weather, you name it. You can overlay your supply chain and see where your disruptions might be, see where your containers are. And when you're selling at the wrong level, when you're selling to maybe someone who works in maybe in a logistics department for a big company at the individual contributor level, they may not value that, and they may not be willing to pay extra for it. And so therefore, the sales team ends up giving it away. Okay. But if they were selling to the chief procurement officer of this company, who has to report to the board and has to show them what's going on with their logistics setup, this is an extremely valuable tool, and you can get a lot of money for it. But most salespeople walk in because the first thing they hear is we're not willing to pay for that. They just give it away, where they could have found the right person to sell it to and traded it for something of high value, because it's very valuable to someone at a very senior level, because it gives you this overview of what's happening in your supply chain, which a person sitting at a desk in a distribution center may not care about.
That's so good, man. I'm thinking about things where, one of the sales 101 is you got to make sure you know who you're selling to, who are the involved parties. If you're going in at the procurement level, there still may be a CFO or CEO level that has to also sign off on it. And so if you give something away at the procurement level that you could have leveraged at the CEO level and still given it away, but the CEO would have been impressed by that give, where the procurement people wouldn't have given $10 for it. It doesn't matter to them. This is really, really good. I hope everybody's writing this stuff down.
Yeah. So selling at the right level, really important. So remember, it's not just finding things that people care about. It's where do they care about it in the organization as well. So if you have a value add with your company that you think is, a huge benefit, that you want to trade something like price or maybe a non-recurring fee up front, or some type of a lengthy contract that you want to lock someone into, and you're not selling at the right level, it's not going to resonate. You're not going to convert, at least not for the value you want. All right, let's see here. All right, this next one is not maximizing deals from the start. And this is all about your opening position. And, there's a lot of discussion about like who should go first. And there's in a negotiation. And a lot of people say the first person who talks loses. And I'm here to tell you that's a bunch of BS. Forget about that. You want to go first. And I'm going to tell you why. So your brain makes up 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes 20% of your total calorie burn. All right. And that's no big deal today. I can, we can go on pause. I can go to the kitchen. I can grab something to eat. No big deal. But we didn't evolve that way. We didn't always eat all the time. So we are hardwired to preserve calories. And because we do that, we create tons of mental shortcuts. One of the mental shortcuts that we create, and we're all guilty of it, all of you are guilty of this, myself too, is we put too much weight on the first piece of information we receive. Too many of us hear something for the first time and think it's true. And I'm going to give you an example, and this should not be controversial, but I always like to say this to people. Remember in the 1990s, if you asked someone if the earth was flat, you asked 10,000 people, how many people would have said yes? Very few. But if you ask people today, it's not a lot, but it's too many. And it's because people get this first piece of information and they start running with it. They don't think about it. And we're hardwired to do that because we want to preserve calories. We do not want to spend the time burning the calories and increase that cognitive load. And because of that, when you're in a negotiation, you go first. You have the ability to psychologically anchor the negotiation and have your counterparty believe that your offer is the best offer, is the most true offer. That's why you should go first. Now, if you're in procurement, you don't truly know what's going on in the marketplace that you're buying from, and you don't really understand the cost structure and the buildup, you might have to ask multiple suppliers for bids and make your decision that way. You can't go first because you don't have the knowledge to be credible. So I understand that. But if you're in sales, I mean, no one knows your product or service better than you. You should go first and psychologically anchor that negotiation ambitiously. Okay. And here's what I'll say is, so I trained thousands of people to negotiate, and we do a role play. And in this role play, we have a very simple scenario where someone's buying a piece of art. So this is very subjective. There's no way to really value art, right? It's personal. And we ask people to write down their opening position and their walkaway position on a piece of paper before they actually go and negotiate with each other. So one year I collected in a spreadsheet the opening position from both parties and where they ended up for hundreds and hundreds of people. And what I found was 83% of the time, they ended up halfway between their opening positions that they wrote down. And that's what they anchored on. That was the first thing they said. So if this is true, that you're more likely to be halfway between your opening positions, where you start is incredibly important. And remember, this is a role play about a piece of art where they're given no guidance on where to start. They can make up any number they want. It could be $20,000, $100, whatever. Halfway.
So let me make sure I'm understanding. Let me make sure I'm understanding that example. So I'm a buyer and the other person is the seller. Neither know anything about the actual value of the art.
I want to sell you this picture right here.
Right. And so I write down a number that I'd be willing to pay, say $1,000. And that person who's selling it writes a number that they think it's worth $5,000. And you're saying 83% of the time, it would be in the middle of 1 and 5,000 is where they end up selling?
Almost exactly. It's shocking.
Wow.
The other thing that happens
so
is, so you're like, what happens with the other 17%? Well, some people end up negotiating against themselves. So I'm like, Jason, just no way, $1,000 isn't going to do it, man. Can you do better than that? The mistake you would make is to start giving another number instead of asking me what I'm willing to sell it at. So you would negotiate against yourself. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. The other thing that happens is someone gives an offer that's so sweet to the other side that they accept it immediately. And I'll say that never happens in your business because no one's foolish enough to give a price that's so sweet that the other side doesn't push back even a little bit. So that means the actual percentage is much greater than 83% of the time. So either you're negotiating against yourself and falling into that trap, or you're meeting halfway between your opening positions.
Yeah.
And that's like 90%.
I think that, well, one of the things I watch Shark Tank a lot. And of course, Shark Tank's all about negotiating, you know, are they going to buy, whether, if they're interested. So I know a lot of it's for TV, but it's also real. And these guys are really investing. But what I'm finding interesting is if a shark says, oh, here's my offer, you know, whatever their offer is, and it's less than what the person wants.
Yeah.
And the person sitting on the stage, like the contestant or whatever, for lack of a better name, says, well, could you do anything better that, you know, maybe go to like 3 or 5% rather than X? Like what kind of, that's not negotiating. That's asking someone. And the fact that the shark would sometimes go, okay, just blows my mind. Like, don't they know that if somebody soft pedals a question like that, they're just, they don't really want it. They're just trying to see what else they can get.
Yeah, right. The shark shouldn't give an answer if the other person says, can you do better? So if anybody on the call, you're in a negotiation, you make an offer and someone says, hey, can you do better? Can you sharpen your pencil? I hate that, right? Can you sharpen your pencil? You say, well, it sounds like you're asking me to negotiate against myself. And I don't do that. So what were you thinking? I've literally used that with clients looking to hire me in this business. And I'm like, and we're going to talk about how your team's going to learn how to not negotiate against themselves on the first day. So don't ask me. And it disarms people very quickly. All right.
That's great. I'm writing that down. It sounds like you're asking me to negotiate against myself. I love it. That's the big one, man. If nobody gets anything else out of that, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's the call
I
my
love
baby
it.
ugly strategy, right? You're not really asking me to negotiate against myself, are you? So don't let that happen to you. All right. So as I said before, 83% of the time I'm finding that people who are doing the role plays in my class, right, which isn't the real world, right, but it's a proxy for it, are halfway between their opening positions. So where you start is extremely important. And we want you to go first because we want you to psychologically anchor the negotiation. The caveat is that you have to be justifiable in your offer. You can't throw something out that's ridiculous. You're going to have no credibility and you're going to be backpedaling the whole time trying to repair the relationship. So it's a interesting dance. So we want you to be ambitious. Ask for a little bit more. Don't start at your walkway. And I'll give you a good example. As anybody who's worked in a big companies often have people who control pricing. They give the sales team what the price they're allowed to go in and sell at. The salesperson makes the biggest mistake. They go out and start at that price, which is essentially their walkaway position. It isn't the opening position. You have no room to maneuver. Right now, you're running back to your boss looking for a discount. If we start at the price the company gave you to go table to a customer, right? We want you to be more ambitious so that you have some room to trade without going back to your boss. So if any of you have salespeople working for you and you tell them like, this is the offer that we want to, sell this product or service at, what you're really saying is this is your walkaway. Go out and sell it for more. Be more ambitious. But if you go below this point, you got to come back and get permission. We don't want your sales team starting at where they need permission. Okay, be ambitious, be confident. I'll give you a quick story on this. Try not to go too long, but I did a negotiation with Nokia in Finland, and we went into this room and we had 5 people on the other side of the table, 2 of us American and a gentleman from Sweden. And we get in there and we are literally there for 3 minutes. And they are not talking at all. Talk about becoming completely unglued. I mean, it's cultural, right? Americans can't do this. So for those of you out there, if you want to display confidence in a negotiation, give your offer and say nothing for like a really long time. Do not fall into the trap of trying to explain your offer and why it's a good deal or why and all the features and benefits. You've already done that up front. That's why you were asked to give a proposal. Walk away, be quiet, be Nordic. Be like the Finns.
Be Nordic. Be Nordic.
I've got a video on my YouTube channel called Be Nordic where I tell the story in depth. But be Nordic. Be confident. Don't give ranges. Don't do this. We could do between, I don't know, $1,000 and $2,000. You just told me that you're not confident and I should go in for the kill. It's $2,000. We can't imagine charging any less than that. It's totally different than maybe $1,000 or $2,000. Right? Very important. So the psychology is really important. You're going to go first. You're not going to give ranges. When you give your ambitious offer, you're going to stop talking. You're not going to come unglued. And you're not going to be stupid either, right? You're going to be justifiable. Your price, your offer, your terms are going to be within a range of acceptability. Okay, so that's what I want you to remember about the opening offer. Go first, anchor ambitiously, be confident, but be justifiable. And if you do that, I promise you, when you leave this call today, or when you watch the video, or however you're consuming this, you will do better. For sure. Okay?
I love it. Eric, this is really good. I'm writing this stuff down. I hope everybody's writing this down. This is really good. I love the anchoring thing. I think that is, I think people don't understand how important that anchor is. I think you talked about how the misunderstanding or misconception we have about that first piece of information. And it was King Solomon who said in Proverbs that the first man who presents his case seems right until the other party gives his side. And I think that's so true in court cases, in news, but it's also true in sales. If we can anchor the right information, it does solidify what people really are going to think about the deal. And then it gives them the opportunity to work off our anchor and it won't move. That's also the same way in relationships. If you think about that in terms of just how you know someone, if you meet them in a professional setting, in a certain location, and they come off as a professional, they are now anchored that way. But if you meet someone who's wearing a wife beater t-shirt and they're working out in the yard, the dude may be worth $3 billion, but you're still anchored at the point, well, he just looked like a normal dude, loser maybe. But this anchoring is so really important. So that's really, really good stuff, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point about thinking about that in terms of outside of business, but how you interact with the world. There's certainly the way your neighborhood looks, the way you present yourself. It as much as we don't want it to be important, it is. All right.
Impressions.
Let's talk about your true source of negotiating power. So if you were to say, hey, what's the most important concept, the one thing I want to walk away with, I think it's this. I think it's, psychology is so important in negotiations. And, I'm not a hostage negotiator. This isn't my specialty, right? But I think we all know, the more confident we are, the more sure we are of ourselves, the more we're able to sit in silence in a business negotiation, the better we do generally. And where does that derive? That derives from what your underlying power is. And what your power is, it's your alternative to reaching an agreement. So I spent my whole career in sales, and there's nothing better than having a big pipeline of ripe opportunities that are going to drop and turn into sales. I mean, if anybody's out there that's been in sales, amen, right? Nothing better. And it's the same, same in your small, my business. If I've got a large pipeline full of companies signed up for classes, I mean, I'm a very strong negotiator, if someone's looking to come in and, do an experience with us, because I have a lot of alternatives. I don't have to accept every customer, but boy, if you talk to me in, June 2020, what do you think June 2020 was like for negotiation trainers? I mean, the universe stopped in March, and by June, it was like, man, I'm running out of money. So my alternatives weren't strong, and my underlying power in the negotiation wasn't strong either. So, I want to kind of go back to that first point where you're talking about high value trades. You're constantly thinking about yourself. All of us are. So you're really good at figuring out what your underlying power is, what you'll do if you don't reach agreement is. All of you right now are running through that in your head. A good example would be, don't fall in love with the first house you see, right? Because then you lose your your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So it's the same in business. Don't be desperate. Don't have all your business with one client, for example, because then you have no leverage. You have no alternative. But are you thinking about their alternatives? And are you being honest with yourself? I had a lot of salespeople work for me in my career, and we were not always honest with ourselves about what the alternatives our counterparty were. And I don't mean that we were confident they weren't going to leave us. It was, we were confident they were going to leave us, and we didn't understand how difficult it was for our customers to leave us. And that's about confidence. It's because you haven't really thought about it. And I want to give you an example. Switching costs. So I was selling power supplies into the telecom equipment segment. You don't have a power supply, your device does not turn on. Okay, so it's a critical component. And we had, we were dual sourced on a lot of parts, but a lot of parts we weren't. So of course, our client, so this is, these are the $50 million accounts, a big account. And the client would say, hey, if you don't lower price, we're going to move all our business over to your competitor. It's so let me think about this. You're going to take all the business away from us, and now you're going to be sole source with them. You're going to give them all the leverage in the negotiation. Is it in your best interest to do that? No. And you're not going to do that. Maybe you'll bring on a third source, though. So now we talk about switching costs. How much does it cost for them to bring on another source? What are the impacts of change management, moving from one relationship to another? What are the impacts of firing up an engineering team for 12 months, for example? What about the certifications they would have to get from Underwriters Laboratory or these electronic bodies in order to change an electronic component? If you're in the medical, what would it take to design someone in with an FDA requirement, for example? Each industry has their own set of standards, but what are the real switching costs for your counterparty if they were to leave you? And have you really done the math? Because once you do the math, you might establish, yes, I need to lower my price a little bit, but not as much as they're pushing me to, because they would incur these huge switching costs if they left me. And there's value in that. And I don't need to fold because their alternatives aren't that good. So be honest with yourself, do the analysis and understand what the switching costs of someone leaving you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good one that I don't think most salespeople think about. I think it gets into the levels of people like you before salespeople are starting to think this way. Most of us don't think about the alternatives. All we think about is they're either going to say yes to me or they're not. It's binary. Either they're going to say yes or they're going to say no, and that's it. But if they say no, what then happens? What's the emotional impact to them or the financial impact to them later if they don't do business with you? And that's what I think you're batting. Do you call it batten or batna?
BATNA. So this is a Harvard term. It's not mine. Try not to bring too much academia into it, but if anybody's read any of their books, it's theirs.
All right,
I also
so
want
BATNA.
so it's BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I also want to kind of, we also don't want to push our customers or our counterparties into a position where they're not able to save face and they have to blow up the relationship because you've done something egregious and damaged it, right? That's something to consider as well. So, I mean, if we think about what's going on right now with Russia, with Vladimir Putin, like we have put him in a corner now, right? His best alternative to an agreement, it sucks. Ours is, I mean, it's a proxy war, right? So ours is really good. We've got to find a way for him to get out of this and save face without doing the unthinkable. So same with your clients. If you know you've got the overwhelming power and their position isn't that great, it doesn't mean you squeeze it down. You don't completely put their nose in the poo-poo, right?
Well, I think that goes back to Jesus's golden rule: do to other people the way that you would want them to do to you. So, we also have to think about that in terms of being a professional negotiators. We're not just here to squeeze out every single dime from the person that we're trying to do business with. We want it to be a fair and equitable transaction. I think that's what you said in the beginning, was that this is about being a fair and equitable transaction. Negotiate hard, win as much as you can, but make sure it's fair and equitable for both parties.
Yeah, another thing I want to bring up, I was reading a really good book on negotiations recently. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but one of the things the guy was saying was the underlying assumption on all this is that your counterparty is rational. Now, have you ever, I know we can't see hands from people, but if you negotiated with someone who wasn't rational because they were upset, you pushed them into a corner, they had no, and they did stupid things that were detrimental to themselves, but they still did it because they weren't rational. So we've got to keep our counterparty rational during this process as well, which means creating value for them. So it's not all just about power and zero sum. And if you do that, I mean, you can do that when you're buying or selling a car or something like that, if it's a one-off transaction, but your reputational risk is high if you don't allow the other side to come out clean as well. So BATNA. So we talked about your BATNA. So your BATNA determines where your walkaway position is, right? So if you have alternatives, you can set the bar higher on where you walk away from a deal. Does that make sense? If you're a salesperson, you got a big pipeline, you don't have to accept the lowest price from the next person, so you can walk away from the deal. When you assess your counterparty's BATNA, you're assessing where you start. If my counterparty doesn't have a lot of options, I can be more ambitious in my opening position. Make sense? So we want to start by analyzing what the alternatives are for our counterparty. Like, what will they do? Who will they work with if they don't work with us to help them build their building, connect their IT system, provide the medical equipment need, whatever your business is. That dictates where you start, right? If there's tons.
I think this is really, really, really good right here, because see, up until you just showed this screen and explained that, I was only thinking about BATNA in terms of my counterparts BATNA. I wasn't thinking about my own. But I think this is really, really, really important, because what you're saying is I need to think about what's my best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What would happen if I don't get the deal? Okay, and that's my walk away point. I know that, okay, I can walk away at that point, but I also need to think about it in terms of the other person. That's where I want to anchor that. So, like, for example, I was negotiating with a guy to do pest control service, of all things. At the cabin we just bought, and I knew that I had alternatives, and that I've got a client of mine in the pest control business. I've got lots of people that could do this for me. There's, lots of people I could call. So I've got a really, I guess, what would you call that, a low walkaway point? Like, I'm not gonna negotiate hard here. It's either, if it's too much, I'm not gonna do it. Period. So I need to think about it in terms of mine as well as the counterparties. That's really, really good.
Yeah, and once you hire whoever you hire, think about the switching costs now. You're not going to want to come all the way out to your cabin just to meet another person. You're probably going to allow them to raise price a little bit before you move to someone else, right? So we're taking that other concept,
right,
dropping it in.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so the 3 challenges I'm going to summarize, and we can start answering some questions and make it a little more interactive. But missing out on high value trades. The reason why people are missing out on high value trades, because they aren't understanding what's important to their counterparty. And because they don't understand that, they're not able to make good trades, because your counterparty may value something you don't. And if that's true, you can trade it for something you do value. And now you can increase the value of the negotiation for both parties. Talk about keeping someone rational. Make sure they get something good out of the deal that you don't care about. It's a great way to keep someone rational in a negotiation. We're not maximizing deals from the start because we're not anchoring our position first or ambitiously enough. Okay, so think about that when you leave here. Are you going to go out and be a little bit more ambitious? Just ask for a little bit more that's justifiable. And I'm pausing to be Nordic because it causes people to draw in when you're quiet like that. Like, it probably freaks some people out if I'm talking, I'm a talker. And if I stop talking for like 30 seconds, the other side starts leaning in. So think about that. Maximize your deals from the start. Be ambitious, be confident, and be justifiable, and go first. And then lastly, that really important concept of what are your alternatives to doing business? If you don't have strong alternatives, can you push your negotiation out? Can you delay it until you've cultivated and developed some backup so you have more leverage in the negotiation, so you don't feel compelled to accept a bad deal because you have no alternative? Does that make sense? Like, I would prefer
man.
Like, if I got a sales call with 2 different clients next week and I got a big negotiation tomorrow, I'd prefer to push that out until after I have these sales calls, because maybe I have 2 deals where it's actually going to be better for me. And now I don't feel psychologically compromised when I go into that negotiation and have to start giving things away unnecessarily. And then, of course, understand what your counterparty will do. I recently had a call with a gentleman, and he told me that there was no one else, literally no one else they could find that could help them with this. It's called backdoor selling. So how do you stop backdoor selling? How do you prevent your company from giving away information? They're like, we searched for days and there's nobody. There's nobody that does this. And I'm like, my price isn't going down now. You didn't need to tell me that. Right? So, yeah. So, and that's the last thing I'll say. It's not in the slide, but that's something I think everybody recognizes, that one of the biggest challenges you have in your business, especially if your business is starting to grow and you've got some staff, is they're giving away information all the time, and they're not aware that they're doing it because they're not in sales and they're not in procurement. There's something else, and they're giving away information. And if someone is really astute on the other side, whether it's sales or procurement, they're picking up this information and they're going to use it. So have that talk with your crew about some of these concepts, so they're not giving things away. Okay.
That's good. This is good, Eric. I want to, before we get into this, what you're going to offer there at the end, I want to say this. We've got a sponsor of the show, and I want to plug my sponsor for just a minute. And then what I want to do is I want to give you my summary of what I heard you say to make sure that I'm hearing it right, because I think this is really, really good information for those of us as entrepreneurs who are in sales. And I'm looking at the people who are here. I know a couple of these people, they're high level folks. This is going to be really good. So I'm going to give you my summary in just a second. But before I do, I want to talk about the sponsor. We have a brand new sponsor of Entrepreneur Master Series called Story. That's STORYY. And Story is a company that works with people like you on their social media presence. Now, I know we're all on TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, and we're looking at these guys that do these amazing short form videos that get thousands and thousands of views. Story is the company behind that. If you want to have a better presence on social media and you want someone to edit those videos, to tell you what videos to shoot, how to say what to say, to give you the anchor and the hook to put in the video, and then edit those videos, write the content for the videos, do the hashtags, and even post that video for you, Story is the company you need to use. It takes away all the guesswork. All you have to do is shoot it. They handle the rest. If you want to learn how to do this, they're giving you, as a listener and a participant in EMS, they're giving you 10% off the first 3 months. You go to therealjasonduncan.com/story. That's therealjasonduncan.com/story. And that's Story with 2 Y's. Why? Because they're awesome. So go check them out. And I appreciate Story being a sponsor, an exclusive sponsor of the Entrepreneur Master Series. So Eric, here's my takeaways, man, from what you're talking about. And as a reminder, everybody, go open your Q&A bubble right now and start asking questions. We're gonna dive into these questions. But I hear the 3 things we're not supposed to do in sales is, first of all, I hear you saying, Eric, is that we're not supposed to give stuff away before we ask why. We got to understand what is it that they're asking for, whether it's a discount or something. Stop doing that. Stop giving it away. If someone says, I want a discount, you don't say yes or no. You need to ask why, because the reason behind why they're asking could be answered, and you could deal with it in so many more ways, and it may actually increase the price of the project. That I've had people ask me for discounts before, and at the end of the day, the project price increased because what they were wanting was not a discounted price. They actually wanted more services. And that's buyers are liars. That's something I learned a long time ago. They don't intend to, at least most don't, but they lie about what they truly want. So missing out on high value trades, so make sure you ask. The second thing I heard you say, what not to do in a sales negotiation, is to let the other person go first. Don't let them go first. You go first, because that allows you to anchor it, and you can be ambitious and confident and justifiable in your offer or your ask. And the third thing I heard you say, what we're not supposed to do in a sales negotiation is where you said you don't understand your true source of power, but is don't underestimate what the alternatives are. You got to actually know what those alternatives are. What is the other person? What's their alternative to this deal? And then also, what's your alternative to the deal? If you forget about that or don't think about that in the sales negotiation, you're not going to maximize the opportunity. So how'd I do, Eric? Is that what you're trying to get across? Because that's what I heard.
Yeah,
That's
you
on
nailed it, man.
That's awesome. On the legal pad.
Awesome. Yeah,
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, are there any questions from the audience live? Make sure to drop those in the Q&A. But while we're waiting on people to drop their questions in, Eric, I know you've got something you want to offer folks to get involved and go deeper on this, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, we've got let me just bring up my screen. So we've got a negotiation class so that anybody can join. It's a public class in January, and it's at I'll drop this in the chat window, the actual address, but it's going to be a virtual class. It's for anybody in sales and procurement or business owners, doesn't matter. And we're going to get really deep on these topics. So what we talked about today were 3 common negotiation challenges, but we're going to help you learn how to prepare for your negotiations by using a process and a tool. And this process and tool you're going to be able to use with your whole company to help you prepare as a group, because you're always going to prepare better as a group than on your own. And let's see here. Yeah, so learn the secrets to negotiations. It's 3 days. So it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's 3 hours per day. So 9 hours in total. We found that we can't do more than 3 hours at a time. You know, not good. We do a lot of role playing. I think it's going to change your life. I took a negotiation class around 2002, and it set me off on a journey that really led me to starting this company. And yeah, I think if you learn how to really negotiate well, it will change your life, not just monetarily, but how you think things through, how you get along with other people. It just makes a huge difference. And it's like golf. It's something you're going to get better at for the rest of your life. So start the journey now. Don't wait. It's $2,300, but for the guests on this show, we're going to take 10% off for anybody that types in RJD on our, if you sign up for the class, it takes you to a sign up window and there's a discount code you can put in. Just put in RJD or Real Jason Duncan, whatever, however you put it in, I'll know who it is, and we'll go ahead and make sure you get 10% off. And there are 10 seats left. So we're gonna have 14 people there, 10 seats currently available right now. So sign up today. Love to see you there. And we're gonna get deep. We're gonna do a lot of role playing, and you're gonna walk away with a ton of new skills.
What are the dates on that again?
That's going to be January 23rd, 25th, and 27th. Yeah. Sorry about that. I completely forgot to put that on the slide.
Sorry. So January 23rd, 25th, and 27th. So 3 days, 3 hours at a time. You can go to Connecting Theory to the Real World. It's a virtual negotiation experience with Erich Rifenburgh. You've seen him talk about how great he is. I mean, you hear it right here on the show, how good he is at what he can do. And these 3 things that you could never do in sales, you should never be doing in sales. If you want to go to that, you can get 10% off this course. It's going to be fantastic. So go to thenegotiationexperience.com. Is that right? Thenegotiationexperience.com. Yeah, so it's going to be in the chat. So it's thenegotiationexperience.com. And then it's virtual negotiation class is what you're looking for. So he just dropped that in the chat, so everybody wants to look at that. We'll put that in the show notes too. So for those of you that go to and listen to this on the podcast later, this will be in the show notes, and this will release before January, before the 23rd. So you'll be able to see that. So let me check here. Yeah, so we've got it all of that's ready to go. So Erich, this has been a phenomenal kind of a deep dive into sales. And what's interesting to me, as someone who does sales training for my clients on a pretty regular basis, is that some of this stuff kind of echoes some things I'm talking about, but some of this is brand new to me. I'd never thought about the BATNA before, and I know I should have. And I think I've probably thought about it in some ways, like what's the cost of not doing this? I think about that a lot for the customer, but I don't think about it for me. And I need to think about that. So this has been really, really deep and powerful. So thank you so much, Erich, for sharing this. I'm very, very happy to know you. Any final words you want to share, advice before we sign off for the day?
Nothing comes to mind other than if you need help, you want to think through a negotiation, you want to reach out to me, just tell me you're part of Jason's crew, and we can have a call. I'm not going to charge you for it. Reach out to me. I want to help people. I love the stories. I love hearing what's happening in the real world. That's what I live for. So if I can help you, reach out. Otherwise, join my class and you'll get the full treatment, and you'll be a customer for life.
All right. Well, Erich, thanks once again. Go ahead and turn your camera and audio off. I've got a few things I'm going to do an outro. I've got some things I want to announce for everybody, but I'll check back in with you before we completely sign out. So I want everybody to know this Entrepreneur Master Series happens twice a month on a pretty regular basis. So our next one's coming up next Tuesday, November the 8th at 3:30 p.m. I normally have 2-week breaks between. This one's only a 1-week break. So make sure you go ahead and register. I'm going to drop the link in the chat window as soon as I tell you what this next one's going to be about. But next Tuesday, my guest expert is Neil Twa. The topic is going to be to 10x your e-commerce business by taking these 4 steps. So if you're in e-commerce, you're going to learn next week how to 10x your e-commerce business by taking these 4 steps. Neil is the founder and CEO of Voltage Digital Marketing. He's been launching, operating, growing private e-commerce label businesses for the last 9 years. And if you have ever thought about getting into the e-commerce space, or you're already in it, you do not want to miss this. So the registration link for next week's EMS is now in the chat. So make sure you register there and go to that next week. And if you're really liking what you hear on this Entrepreneur Master Series, I want to invite you to get more involved. I want to ask you as an entrepreneur, what would it be like to know when you could exit your business? What would it be like to know that you're finally able to walk away from day-to-day operations? Well, that's what I do every day. And if you want to take a free assessment, I've got an exit readiness assessment that's completely free at amireadytoexit.com. amireadytoexit.com. And you get a free report that shows you how close you are to exiting and what steps you need to take to prepare your business for you to walk away from daily operations. That doesn't mean you have to sell it, but maybe you just don't want to spend every single 40, 50, 60, 70-hour week in the business. You want to do some other things. And one lucky person who takes that assessment at amireadytoexit.com in the next 24 hours is going to get half off my next business accelerator group coaching program that starts on November 29th. That's half off. That's a $4,000 value. So you want to go check that out at amireadytoexit.com. Again, thank you to my sponsor, Story. You can go check out Story at therealjasonduncan.com/story if you're interested in getting their services for your social media platforms. And I want to thank my special guest, Erich Rifenburgh, the Negotiation Experience. I encourage everyone to go sign up for this Connecting Theory to the Real World course in January, on January 23rd, 25th, and 27th. So what's your takeaway? What's my takeaway? Well, my takeaway is it sounds like you're asking me to negotiate against myself. Erich, I will never forget that one. That one's absolute. That's gold nugget right there. I'm going to make sure I say that. Anytime somebody says, can you do better than that? Or I don't know about that. That's too much. Can you do better? I'm going to say, well, it sounds like you're asking me to negotiate against myself. I will use that forever. And I'll always remember you, Erich, for doing that. So thank you so much, Erich. Thanks for everybody for being here. This has been the Entrepreneur Master Series. I am the real Jason Duncan. And as always, Jesus is King. See you next time.